take myself out of that we, because I'm not strictly speaking in the development field at all, but reading about the subject and participating at this meeting here, I was struck with one omission, which is that both in the literature and in the discussions here, we have been talking about indices of development. Is a country doing well on a development basis, or is it not? And the unit of measurement has been, traditionally, the state, the GDP, for example. And as we know, the UN began to enrich that approach by talking about human development indices. But there too, the assumption is still the liberal model of a society composed of a state, of the representative of the state, i.e. the government, and the individual. So either we're measuring the government's performance, or we are measuring the government's performance as reflected in literacy rates of individuals and survival rates and health rates. What I found missing in that is the intermediate step that is ignored and not being measured at all, meaning the presence and functionality of the social communities in which individuals in a state in fact lead their lives. And there are several layers of community. I happen to have been studying indigenous communities for whom the community is really essential. They would consider that that came before both the state and the individuals in that community. So to me, I think the challenge in development thinking is, in the case of indigenous peoples, surely how well that community is doing. But I think even beyond indigenous peoples, we need to ask ourselves a question in measuring the health of a society, which is, I think, what development hopes to focus on, the general health, social, psychological, and physical, that we begin to try and theorize ways of conceptualizing communities that are relevant to the individuals who live in them, and figure out ways of measuring the functionality of that. In other words, how do you feel about your community or your communities? Is it functioning well? Now, Bhutan has done something a little bit similar, i.e. the Gross Happiness Index, but that too uses the state as a unit of measurement. I think that we don't have to displace other indices, but we need to add to the accepted set of indices by really looking at the functionality of communities. Do people feel well in their communities? What communities exist and matter to people? And this will change from state to state, obviously. So that's the omission that surprised me most in the development field. Yes, I think that this is normal. When you are in a particular field, you tend to sort of focus your lens on that and become more and more oblivious to other possible lenses. And I think that there was such faith in growth equals progress equals poverty reduction that it's very hard to tear people away from that faith. And although there is recognition of sustainability being an issue, I still feel that most development specialists are focusing on growth rather than on sustainability. And I think that's the big gap. You know, in theory, we understand about sustainability, but there was not sufficient talk, in my view, about sustainability and how we measure it, how we achieve it here. I really don't know the answer to that because I don't know what development practitioners would be focused on, but I hope that they would be focused on issues of sustainability, issues of what Evo Morales in Bolivia calls vivir bien, which is living well as opposed to growing as such. And I think that are we well as individuals, are we well in our communities, and are we well with the physical space that we inhabit? If those three things are taken care of, we're in pretty good shape. But first of all, the focus has to really look at them all three together.